Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. It's our fourth straight week of webinars, which is unprecedented. We usually try to do two a month, but due to some scheduling things, we've had to go back to back to back to back, um, which has never been done before. I don't think in any venue, not even sports. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. As always, we love for you to introduce yourself to us in the chat. Say hello. Come on through. We have a very informative webinar for you all today with Youth Move PA. We're excited for you to be here on this rainy Wednesday in May. I feel like May has been what April should have been. April showers.
Oh, good one.
And so far, May has just been full of rain. And I'm like,
Yes. I'm in York, Pennsylvania, so we've had a couple days of rain in a row. So I hear
mm-hmm.
you. I see another Yorker just popped up.
Nice in western Pennsylvania today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sun's out.
So y'all skipping on the rain, huh, Kev?
Yeah.
I drove from Beaver County to Harrisburg, so primarily on the turnpike yesterday, and it was harrowing. The rain was so bad. Everyone was doing like 45 because you couldn't see.
Yeah, it was pretty much sideways. I feel like it's been like even because I've been trying to avoid turning on the air because it's not been quite as hot. So just opening the windows in the house and having things blow through, but it was raining so hard. I was like, God, gotta close the windows. And so welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. I'm glad to see you here. Seeing our numbers start to slowly trickle up. So with that said, I'm going to get us started. So I want to welcome everybody to our virtual speaker series for 2025. Today's webinar is titled Sources of Strength, Hope, Help, and Strength. It's provided by the PA Care Partnership, which is a statewide system of care grant in association with the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, better known as HomeSauce. And with that, I will toss it over to Colleen to have her introduce our presenters for the day.
Great. Thanks, Jamal. We have two excellent presenters, Kevin Poskaric, who is with Youth Move, and I'm going to just share a little bit about both of our speakers. Our second speaker is Dan Kropinski. So for Kevin, he has been involved in the youth peer support and program implementation for over 8 years. He's the program director for Youth Move, and he specializes in evidence-based curricula and trauma-informed practices, thereby ensuring high-quality services, delivery, and compliance. Kevin has earned multiple certifications, including peer specialist, recovery specialist, and family recovery specialist, which definitely helps in his position as Youth Move Director. He's been very involved in his career in statewide initiatives at promoting wellness and resilience and recovery among adolescents. So we're very excited to have Kevin be part of the presentation today. Our second speaker is Dan. Dan is a skilled training specialist and project coordinator with a lot of experience in youth training and program coordination. He effectively engages diverse student populations and adapts training styles to enhance participant engagement and retention. He's trained students and adults statewide in evidence-based curricula demonstrating success in program implementation and administrative oversight. So we are excited to have Dan be part of this presentation as well. So take it away, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colleen, and thank you, Jamal, and thank you, PA Care Partnership, for really giving us a platform to amplify Youth Move PA and the Sources of Strength program. We were given an opportunity July of 2023 with a grant opportunity through the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, like I said, July of 2023, to bring this program, Sources of Strength, into the state of Pennsylvania. I believe it's in 44 states now, and I believe we were the 44th state to bring Sources of Strength into the state of Pennsylvania. And we were really excited when we got the news we were going to receive grant funding to bring it into the state of Pennsylvania. Sources of Strength really is a program for school implementation into middle schools and high schools, and they're even implementing it into colleges and to some community-based settings as well now. So without further ado, we're going to really introduce you to a lot of information about Sources of Strength. We'll get into the learning objectives here in a minute. Again, as Colleen kind of introduced us, my name is Kevin Piskaric. I'm a certified peer specialist, certified recovery specialist, certified family recovery specialist. I'm also a certified peer supervisor as well. Before coming to Youth Move PA, I worked as a certified peer specialist as a peer provider in Washington County called AMI Inc. It's in Washington County. I specifically worked in their youth peer provider, in the youth peer provider realm, really delivering direct service with youth and young adults in CPS services. I supervised their peer mentoring program. I supervised their drop-in. Worked in psych rehab a little bit as well, psychiatric rehabilitation services. So I kind of wore many hats, did a lot of things, and I really enjoyed working in direct service. Worked there for about 4 years and then came to Youth Move PA and really started to really pick up and bring a lot of different avenues and aspects to Youth Move PA, and been at Youth Move for going on 5 years now, and it's really just flown by, and we've really picked up and brought a lot of programs to Youth Move PA, and we're really doing a lot of things at Youth Move PA that I'm really proud of now. So yeah, and Sources of Strength is really just in addition to one of the many things that Youth Move PA is doing, and it's really just an amazing program. So I will kick it over to Dan to introduce himself.
Thanks, Kev. Yeah, so I'm Dan Krupinski, and I am, as you said, the project coordinator for Sources of Strength, as well as one half of the lead training team, along with my partner, Mandy Burgess-Gonzalez. So we do the vast majority of the trainings all over the state. As you can see, I have far fewer credentials than Kevin does, but I do have a degree in communication, so I am good at talking. At least theoretically, you all can be the judge of that. I was not in the field of mental health or really anywhere close to it prior to this. So I was brought into Youth Move in July of 2023 when this grant was received to be a part of the Sources team. I was in entertainment before that, but I really wanted a change. I really needed a change, to be honest. And through a series of very fortunate events, I found out about this upcoming project. I was very excited for it. I applied, and here I am. They kept me, so things must be going pretty well. But Sources has really been my life for the last 2 years. Kevin runs all of Youth Move and he sort of has his hands going everywhere and he's very involved in sources. I am 100% sources. I do nothing else. So I've just really come to love this program. It's really a part of me now and who I am. And I just find myself working parts of it into my everyday life, even when I'm not working, but in the best way possible. So very excited to be able to share this with you all.
So we are now going to get into the learning objectives of today, which are pretty simply learning the understanding of the upstream prevention model and its principles. If you understand prevention a little bit, we're going to learn about really what upstream prevention and Dan is really going to take you through the understanding of that. We're going to learn some insight into national and Pennsylvania specific data regarding the Sources of Strength program. So there is a national Sources of Strength entity, and they do all like the train the trainer trainings, and we have been trained by their national team, and they are the ones that acquired the evidence-based curricula, and we were trained under them. And we have also contracted with the Youth and Family Training Institute over the past year to collect some Pennsylvania specific data. So we'll kind of share some of that with you all today. And then you'll really gain an understanding of and an appreciation of how student and faculty collaboration can significantly enhance prevention efforts. Because what we find is just having students do prevention lacks prevention effort when you just do one or the other. Just having students or just having faculty do it, when you have it together, it really makes a much bigger impact having students and faculty doing prevention work together. And we will also learn some knowledge about the strengths wheel, which you'll learn more about here in a little bit. It's really a powerful tool to identify and draw strength from various sources. And Dan's going to take you through that strengths wheel as well. So what is Sources of Strength? And Sources of Strength is the first suicide prevention program involving peer leaders to enhance protective factors associated with reducing suicide at the school population level. And that's from the American Journal of Public Health. And Sources really, at this time when it did come out years back, it is the only evidence-based prevention model that engages youth as peer leaders and school staff as adult allies in the implementation of intentional campaigns to foster belonging, hope, and connection. So rather than focusing on reducing negative outcomes, Sources of Strength really focuses on building desired states of being. Sources of Strength, our vision is really to empower a well world. We always say that we don't want to focus on the leading causes of death. We want to emphasize the leading causes of life.
And so to kind of go right along with that and explain what we mean by upstream suicide prevention and how that fits in to not really talking about suicide, I'm going to give you the exact example that we use in the trainings to really illustrate this, because we have a parable that we share that really puts this into perspective. So if you see this river here with the village right beside it, there is a woman that goes out every single morning for a walk with her dog, which you can see there illustrated as well. So she's out there one morning for her daily walk, and suddenly she hears somebody in the water screaming for help. She dives in, pulls them out to safety, saves their life. Next morning, she wakes up, goes for her walk again. Exact same thing happens. Somebody screaming for help, jumps in, pulls them out to shore, saves their life. Now, at this point, the villagers are starting to notice a bit of a trend. So they set up a bunch of preventative measures to stop this from happening and stop people from going over the waterfall at the end of the river. They set up lifeguard towers, they do a lot of training, they have people patrolling the shores just before the waterfall. One day, the woman comes out and she starts actually walking the other way, away from the waterfall and further upstream. And everybody starts losing their minds. They're yelling at her, "Where are you going? You can't go that way. You know better than anybody. We have to be down here to stop people from going over the waterfall." And she goes, "No, I know that, but I want to go upstream and find out why people are falling in the water in the first place." So that's what we mean by upstream suicide prevention. So what we want to do in this story is rather than pull people out of the water just before they go over the waterfall, we want to stop them from falling in the water in the first place, or at the very least, give them the tools to help get themselves to shore before it becomes a real crisis situation. So this is an evidence-based program. You can see a list of some of our research partners here on the screen. The University of Rochester are the original research partners. They've been here since the very beginning. They still are to this day. The CDC has also funded quite a bit of research, including the most recent research that we'll get into in just a little bit. You might also notice here that while this is a program that's in 44 US states, not all of these research partners are based in the United States. That's because Sources does have a reach outside of the US. You can see Australia there, which I may or may not have looked into how you get those jobs, but that's for another day. So this is something that not only has been very popular and very successful in the US, but has even started to creep outside and really become a worldwide program. This is a quick overview of some of the impact of sources of strength from our evidence base. So you can see here that amongst the peer leaders, and I'll explain a little bit more what that means, but the peer leaders are the students in the school that are a part of the program. They're the ones who are trained in sources, and they're the ones who really roll sources out in the school. So among those students, you can see there's an increase in healthy and coping attitudes and norms. There is more connection to adults, which is a huge part of this program, and I'll get into a little bit more about that. The peer leaders are 4 times more likely to refer a peer to an adult, and that the largest gains were actually for the least connected or the least healthy peer leaders. So to sort of put that another way, the students who needed it the most have been shown to get the most out of it, which I think is great. And then in the larger school population, there is an increase in help-seeking acceptability. There's an increased perception that adults can help suicidal peers. And as we all know, perception is usually reality. So changing that, a big part of this, again, back to that adult connection. And then once again, largest gains were for students with a history of suicide attempts. So the students who needed it the most school-wide are the ones who are getting the most out of it. So that's just sort of a snapshot of some of what we pulled out of our evidence base to really highlight what the program has been shown and proven to do. Now, this looks very daunting. I understand. Please don't be too scared by it. This is a part of what we call the social network theory, which explains why we pick the teams the way that we do. So I mentioned before, the students who are part of this are called peer leaders. Now, when we work with the school, they don't just put out a call and say, "Hey, who wants to be in this program?" And it's whoever signs up. We want, the way we illustrate it is to have every lunch table in the cafeteria to be represented. So we really want connection from all over the school. And so to sort of illustrate that and how that works, we have this, again, very scary looking chart, but it's really not that bad. So the way this works is every dot you see here is a student. Now, the larger that the dot is, means that they have more connections in the school. So this is all self-reported. They were asked to name 5 friends. So the more connections you have outgoing or coming in, the larger your circle is going to be. And the shading is red is suicide attempts, and the darker the red is means more suicide attempts. And same with the yellow for suicidal ideation. So the darker the shade, the more suicidal ideations have been reported. And then there's a few orange in there as well. Of course, that means a combination of the two. So there's a few things here that I'd like to point out. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but One part that's very important to note here is that most of this is white, which is good because that means that most of these students have not reported a suicide attempt or suicidal ideation. So that's always a big part to sort of impress. But you do see obviously clusters in here and really sort of throughout. In every group, there is some suicide attempt and some suicide ideation reporting. You certainly see clustered groups as well. So when you see one red dot, especially one that's a little bit bigger, it's usually connected to a few other of the red dots, which just shows the connection and how one person's feeling or one person's kind of connection within the school can also spread out to others. And the same with the yellow dots. And another part that's really important to point out here is the outside dots that aren't connected to anybody. So those would be what we call the isolated students. Everyone always assumes when you get into this that those isolated students are the ones most at risk, that they are just miserable, can't connect with anybody. There are these outliers that are just most in need of these programs and most at risk. Not at all. Certainly some of them are, but the vast majority that you see here aren't reporting suicidal ideations or suicidal attempts. Some people, frankly, just like being alone, so it works for them. But also, this only connects in the school. So you might have students here that are on an AAU basketball team or a club volleyball team or a part of the 4-H club, and they have connections, they have friends outside of the school, and that's where they get their social interaction from. So it's really important to make sure to note that not kind of prejudge who's going to be the students that are in danger and who are the ones who are a little bit safer. Because you also notice here, some of the larger dots, which means the ones with the most connections, are showing up as red and yellow. This similar school, very similar graph. The only thing that we're changing here is the color, the shading green means a student sought adult help. And this could be any kind of help at all. It does not have to be something very serious or mental health related. It could be help with homework, help with a crush they might have on somebody, help with driving tests. So any kind of help at all is what this is showing. And if you notice, a lot of the same characteristics show up here as they do on the other graph, and some of it inverted. So you notice that where the green does appear, a lot of it is once again very clustered. And you also notice that where the white is here, it's once again pretty clustered. Now, if you sort of go back and forth with the graph, you'll also notice that where you do have a lot of the green here is where you have a lot of the white on the previous. And that's because there have been connections that show that the more a student has access to adults or feel comfortable with adults, they're much less likely to themselves report suicidal ideation or suicide attempts, or also kind of let maybe warning signs from their friends go by because rather than not knowing what to do, they know exactly who to go to get started at the very least. Because what this program is not teaching students to be junior social workers or junior psychologists or anything like that, because that is not fair. That is not their role. That should not be what they're expected to do. What this program really does is teach those students to learn the warning signs and be able to connect them with somebody who actually can help. It's at the school level a lot of times, that's great, but this could also be adult help outside of the school. It could be a parent, it could be another community member. So there's just a ton of correlation between that connection with adult and that suicide number coming down.
I just wanted to point out, Dan, you do a really great job explaining those two slides with the dots on them, and there's actually those are two slides pulled straight from the training with the adults that we do in the training, and it kind of just goes to show the importance and the connection of students to adults. The more we can't, when Dan will talk about this when he talks about the model sources of strength, the importance, and we probably can't reiterate this enough, the more adults that you can get as part of your sources of strength program, it's so important. A lot of programs, that kind of happen in schools. They typically only have one adult that are a part of these programs. Sources of strength kind of, it's important to have as many adults as part of these programs as possible, because it gives the student access to as many trusted adults as possible. It's so important as part of these programs. So this next slide, this is some of the most up-to-date, newest research that Sources of Strength has come out with. They just released it, I want to say a month and a half ago, something like that. So their groundbreaking research that they released, it's pretty basic. It's up on the slide, that it reduces suicide attempts by 29%. So I can give you a little more detail on that. The study on this was conducted for a 2-year period from 2017 to 2019. The cluster randomized control trial involved 20 high schools and 6,539 students, tracking outcomes across 4 assessment waves. So it was a good amount of students. So peer leaders trained in multi-dimensional healthy coping strategies led school-wide campaigns under the guidance of adult advisors. That's what we do with Sources of Strength. So out of this randomized control trial, the results showed that the program significantly reduced new suicide attempts by 29%, reinforcing its effectiveness at a school population level. So just kind of showing that the effectiveness of sources of strength, reducing suicide attempts by 29%. Yep, you're good, Dan.
So you've sort of seen this hinted at a little bit. It's kind of appeared here and there, but now we're really going to dig into what is frankly the core of the program. And that is this strengths wheel, these 8 protective factors that most of the training and then most of the following campaigns that the school does are really sort of run out of. I'm going to go through each of them sort of quickly because they're mostly self-explanatory just by the name, but to give a little bit better idea of how we view them, because some of them are viewed in a different way or with a few additions to say than what a lot of people can sometimes think. So first is family support. Family support, obviously, very basically, can be your blood relatives, your biological parents, your siblings, grandparents, anyone like that. That is, of course, family support. But frankly, not everybody has that. And some people have what we like to call chosen family. So it can be somebody that's a parental figure in your life, even though you're not related to them at all. Most of us, at least growing up, probably had a friend that we called our brother or our sister. They weren't really our brother or sister. That's part of a chosen family as well. And it can also be a combination of some people might have a really great family, but then say they go off to college for the first time 5 hours away. It's the first time they've ever been away from their parents, really. And they have a friend that lives close by. And then that family kind of becomes sort of their surrogate family while they're away from school. So family support can really look a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. And these kind of all blend into each other a little bit. They're not put in this order by accident. So the next is positive friends, which again, some of that chosen family really can also overlap with positive friends. And specifically, positive friends, not just friends. Because I know I have, and I certainly don't want to speak for all of you, but judging by the number of trainings I've done and the hands that I normally see when I ask this question, most of us have either had or have even been willing to admit that we've been a negative friend at some point in our life. Usually this will happen when you're younger because a lot of times you're sort of figuring out what it is to be a friend. So we really want to push home the idea of these positive friends and also let the students express what their idea of a positive friend are, or even what their idea of a negative friend is. Because sometimes in these discussions, somebody will hear from one of their peers and think, oh, wow, I never even really thought of that as sort of a negative trend from one of my friends. And it kind of gives them this light bulb moment that maybe they need to start setting different boundaries. So That one is really important. That's probably my favorite and probably the one that the students relate to the most throughout. And next is mentors. Mentors are something that can start when you're pretty young. Not only having a mentor, which is where a lot of people would probably think that the students are going to be coming from at these ages, but even being a mentor. I was just at one of our sources school earlier in the week, and it was a high school that we trained. And what they're doing is actually going to their middle school and presenting on sources. And they've been doing this for a few months now. And I got to see how interactive they are with the students now, the middle school students, and how much they love it. So that's a great example of these students who maybe a few months ago weren't even mentors, just becoming mentors on their own. So it doesn't always have to be a student that's mentored by an adult. It really goes throughout all different ages and throughout different stages of life. Healthy activities is really the one that sort of spans this entire wheel. Really, anything that you can think of that is a healthy activity is going to fit in somewhere in this wheel. So something that's exercise or obviously physical health, just sort of hanging out with your friends, talking with your family, and even things that we might not think of as healthy activities. So maybe you're just having one of those days, and you all know what I mean when I say one of those days, and you just want to go home, sit on the couch, and eat an entire pint of ice cream by yourself. Awesome. For that night, that is a healthy activity for you if that's what you need to do to kind of just reset your mind. Now, if you're doing that every night, then that one I don't think we can put in there. But healthy activities can look, as everything else, a lot of different ways for a lot of different people and can also change from day to day for people as to what a healthy activity is. Generosity is pretty standard. And one of the things that we really like to kind of focus on is when a lot of people think of generosity, the first thing you think of is being generous to other people, because a lot of people, when they first think of that, which in itself is sort of a generous thought, it's what can I do to be generous to others? But we also like to focus on what have people done for you that is generous, and kind of also develop an appreciation of that, and sort of note that generosity can be as big of something as volunteering or donating money, or as small as simply holding a door for somebody. So it can look a lot of different ways, and it's something that you, for the most part, can do every single day. Spirituality is the most difficult one, and when I'm doing a shorter version of this, the only one I touch on, especially because we work mostly in a public school setting, and a lot of people see spirituality and think of and only of religion. If that's how somebody practices spirituality, that is awesome and that is wonderful for them. But there are also many other ways to practice spirituality. So something like yoga is a very spiritual practice for a lot of people. Just being outside in nature, walking through the woods, sitting by the water and listening to the waves, that can be spiritual for people as well. So there are a lot of different ways to practice spirituality, and this really is the most difficult one to sort of grasp in the wheel. It's the one I had the most trouble with when I was first starting out as well, because it can sort of take some time to figure out what is spiritual for me if I don't have something as obvious as sort of what my own religious beliefs are or those type of beliefs are. But it's something that's very important, and something that once you kind of finally clicks for you, you really start to see how it fits in with everything else. And then physical health and mental health we tackle together in the training because the two of them are really tied together. So the example that we use is, so my partner in the training, Mandy, she's actually a blue belt in jujitsu. So we like to use the example that if she's showing me some jujitsu moves and I accidentally get a little bit too close and boom, she breaks my leg and very obviously breaks my leg. I don't want to get too graphic, but you all can kind of imagine what that looks like. If I just kind of got up and was like, I'm fine, I'll just walk it off, it'll be okay a little bit later. Absolutely nobody would be okay with that. People would be telling me, no, you have to go to the hospital. You have to see somebody. You can't just leave that untreated. We don't really do that with mental health. Granted, mental health can be a lot more difficult to sort of see sometimes than those physical health ailments, but not always. But we're much more willing to kind of let warning signs go by when we see friends or peers' mental health maybe starting to deteriorate deteriorate. Whereas if that same thing was happening on some level with their physical health, we would immediately tell them, "Man, you have to go see somebody. You have to get help for this." So we really tie those two together, and it kind of helps put into a new perspective of how to think about mental health. And this is a sources of strength model. So this kind of just goes through everything we really talked about, but puts it into a little bit more of a clear snapshot. So you can see we have that team of adult advisors and peer leaders. And you see there that diverse team of adult advisors and peer leaders. And once again, certainly we mean diversity and what you would think of normally when diversity comes to mind, but really keeping in mind that every lunch table in the cafeteria being represented as part of your diversity. And that really goes for the adult staff as well, because there's certain adults in the school that are just going to relate better to certain groups of students. So making sure that you also have that diversity on your adult staff, and it's not just entirely your counselors or entirely one teachers from or one group of teachers from one department, and making sure you're trying to spread those out as much as possible. So those teams come together and they go through the training process. The training is honestly very, very fun. And I know a lot of people come out and they say whatever they're doing is fun, and it's not. I promise this one actually is. It is my favorite thing that Mandy and I do as part of our job. The students love it. The teachers love it as well. Because by doing that sort of upstream model and focusing on the strength, our days are really focused on positivity and not toxic positivity, because there is a big difference there. It's a very real level of positivity and what's actually in our lives. And we play a lot of games, we do a lot of sharing. There's a lot of kind of that learning without even realizing that you're learning. So after the training is over and kind of all of that has been set up, we really step back, and the school then kind of runs their own program and comes up with their own strategic messaging campaigns. The reason that schools run their own program is because every school is very different. So if we came in and told you you have to do this mental health this month and this physical health this month and this mentors this month, sure, maybe I'm taking that from another school and it worked awesome for them, but this school has entirely different students, and they have entirely different socioeconomic status, and they have entirely different teachers and staff. So what worked for that school is probably not going to work exactly the same in this school. So we really come in and kind of just give the ideas and sort of what this looks like, and the schools really figure out specifically what it looks like for their school. And that's what Kevin sort of alluded to a little bit before, and why this is a peer-led program, because the students are going to know what's going on way more than the adults. Even the most well-meaning adults are not going to have that type of insight that the students are going to have. So that's why it's really led by them, and the campaigns and these ideas start with them. And that's where you get that positive cultural change, and where the program really starts to come together. And you see that, remember in the evidence base, we talked about the difference between the peer leaders and the school population. So that's when you start to move from just the peer leaders who've been trained to really affecting the entire school.
So as Dan was talking about with the messaging campaigns and really everything else that's related to sources, we really spread messages of hope, help, and strength, and avoid messages of sad, shock, and trauma. So hope, help, and strength is not just a catchphrase. It really is the foundational lens through which we approach absolutely everything. We avoid the typical prevention strategies that are based in sad, shock, trauma approaches. If you think about programs like QPR programs are great programs and they're absolutely needed. But if you sat in a QPR and you hear a lot of things like death data and shocking statistics and some other programs that talk about traumatic death stories, those programs are needed. That's just not where sources lies. Telling students what behaviors or norms they should avoid rather than inviting them into options of what behaviors or norms they should engage in. This is just really where sources is in that strengths-based upstream. While these strategies may have impact on a portion or a population, it can really have a negative impact on our most vulnerable students and staff. We never want to cause harm. So we really do this by sharing on social media campaigns. We focus on hope, help, and strength, inspiring, encouraging, and empowering stories and images. We can share how to help, how to get help, where and from whom to get help, and what help looks like, an adolescent's perspective, normalize help-seeking behavior with everything from homework to harassment and our physical and mental health. And Dan talked about the 8 protective factors on the will and how these strengths have helped us, focusing on stories of strength in our individual community assets rather than the deficits, overwhelming stressors, and adversities. So when we think about examples of hope, help, and strength-based messaging, think about very simply, don't litter versus please recycle. Or if you think about something very simply as 82% of students at BV High School practice healthy coping strategies versus 18% of students at BV High School report binge drinking, really highlighting the positive healthy coping strategies versus the negative binge drinking. We're highlighting the behavior that we want to see rather than the negative behavior.
So that's sort of the only thing we kind of require is, as I said, it's really up to the schools what they want to do and how they want to get this information out. But it does all have to be sort of in that hope, help, and strength kind of mode. And we don't just do the training and then leave and say, good luck, you can figure the rest out. We do leave them with a lot of resources and a lot of great ideas of where to get started. And it starts with these templated campaigns that we go over with the adult advisors in the training and also sort of give out to the students in their day of training as well and let them brainstorm and figure out how they want to do these. So these are all pretty explanatory. Getting the word out campaign, I'm sure you can figure out what that looks like, spreading messages. You see trusted adults here again, because that's a really big one. I am stronger campaigns. So there's just things that you can do that kind of fit into one of these parts of the wheel, or you can really combine parts of the wheel as well. Sources of Strength weeks have become very popular, and I see those quite a bit across the country. The Sources of Strength Instagram page, their national page, which is just at Sources of Strength, constantly is sharing campaigns from all over. So that's where I see a lot of stuff and also kind of give ideas to my schools. And I also recommend to them to go look at that for ideas as well. So you probably all have seen Spirit Weeks in schools, very similar idea, different part of the wheel Monday through Friday, and maybe combine 2 one day if you want to get all of those in. But these are the types of things that we look at when we're talking about these strategic messaging campaigns and sort of how to focus them and really target them to be able to. We don't just want to come out and say, hey, we want everybody to do well and be positive. That's awesome. That's a great message. It's also not super helpful to just say that. What we want to do is say, hey, what we want to do this month is focus on how are positive friends an important part of your life? Or if it's not a part of your life or not what you're strong in, what could you do to maybe make that in the future a part of your life? So that's what we mean also by targeted messaging and strategic messaging campaigns, is to make sure that we actually have a very specific message when we're doing these rollouts. So we're going to go through a few examples to sort of illustrate this a little bit more. This is one I absolutely love because I think this epitomizes a Sources of Strength program in a way that I've never really seen done better. So this is an I Am a Trusted Adult campaign. The way this worked is you see those 7 criteria there on the side, and adults in the school were given the chance to sign and say, yes, I pledge to that. I pledge to be a trusted adult and live up to all of that. And if they did, they got their door decorated, as you can see there on the other side. Now, the reason I say this epitomizes to me what I think a perfect sources campaign is, or at least the most effective kind, because they don't all have to be the greatest thing ever, is that if you really think about it, there's sort of 2 components here. There is the fun and creative side, which is a huge part of sources. That's the door decoration. Students can get together, have fun with their friends or their peers, really kind of let their creativity flow, just have a good time with that. And then on the other side of that, walking through the school, if there's a student who needs help for themselves or needs help for a peer and they want to reach out to somebody, but they just don't know where to go, or they don't know the adults in the school that might be the easiest to talk to, going to be kind of easier now to at least find out where to start in this school. So that's why I love this campaign so much, because it really fits in everything sources should be, which is fun and creative and upbeat, but then also something that's very helpful in a practical world and really fosters that connection between the students and the adults.
So this is a trusted adult campaign. As you can see on a couple of these, it gives it that like stained glass window kind of look, and they just named their trusted adults and kind of put it up as looking like stained glass. There's a couple of different looks of that on here. And this is an I Am Stronger campaign, and the students pretty much just named their strength that they would like to get stronger in, and they kind of did some artwork around it, and then did some and put it on succulents, and these are strengths that they want to grow stronger in.
And then this is another one that I really like to highlight because of a very specific way this was rolled out. So this is actually a pretty common campaign that I've seen done quite a bit, which is these sort of chain links that go down hallways. So students are given the ability to, you can do it very specifically to who is a positive friend or who is a mentor, or you can make it very broad. What is a strength for you? And they write it down and it's added to this chain link, which honestly, this is a really cool visual to kind of be able to walk through that school and just be able to see how much positivity or how many good things that there are going on. But what I really loved about this one is not only did they do this for their school, when other schools came in for a sporting event or a debate competition or band competition, whatever it might be, they'd usually be asked about what is that, and eventually they thought of, hey, this is what it is, do you want to join too? And they actually let other visiting schools kind of create it as well to really create an even bigger visual of this is what's going on even further around me and outside of the school, which I just thought is a really awesome way to incorporate the program outside of your, not only your school walls, but even your sort of local community walls, and really go to a much larger audience. So I loved that one and how big that they were able to make it. And this is our implementation cycle. So this has really kind of been covered in one way or another, but just to sort of put it up visually and also go through it a little bit more point to point, what it looks like when we partner with the school to bring in the program. So there is obviously the pre-training process, which frankly is pretty quick and painless. After a school signs on, we send them kind of their criteria of this is how you pick your adult advisor team, this is how to pick your peer leader team, and for them to go out and sort of do that recruitment and get the buy-in from both of those teams and get them to have an idea of what to expect and why they're being asked to be a part of this. And then the training itself, which, as I said, is really super fun. So there's day one of training, which is with just the adult advisors. That usually runs about a half of a day, say between 8:30 to 1:30, something like that. Obviously, give or take wherever you want to start that at. And then day two is with the peer leaders and the adult advisors together. And that's usually about a full school day. So the reason we like to do them as two separate is because on day one, we do some of the more, I'll say it, boring stuff with the adults, like go over that social network theory, that big wild graph I showed before, and also sort of explain some of what we're going to do day two with the students. But day two with the students is absolutely no PowerPoint, no slides. There's never any lecturing or anything here. Everybody sits in a circle together. Myself and my training partner will sit on opposite sides because we very much want to create a sense of we're all talking with each other. Nobody is standing up and we're not talking to everybody. The adults aren't talking to the students. So it really sort of creates that culture. And we try to get some of that started on day one with the adults so they're used to it. And then day two, not only get it ready for the students, but we really want the students and the adult connection to start that day. So they're finally able to kind of get that started on day two of the training together. And that's when the messaging campaigns start. So we usually recommend within the first 10 days, and that's simply because there's a ton of momentum. As soon as the training is over, one of the last things we do is have the students brainstorm and start thinking of campaign ideas. They get really excited about what they can do or where that gets started. And we like to sort of capture that and make sure that we're keeping that as we go on. I know this is straight from national. I know this says meet twice a month. Most schools, that's impossible for, and we completely understand. The way they've actually even changed the wording now is to meet regularly, which is sort of how I was explaining it for a while as well, because we do understand it's very difficult to find time in the school day or around the school day. So it's really just kind of meeting on a regular basis with some type of schedule that you're able to stick to and be able to roll out 3, 4, 5, 6 messaging campaigns every year. So whatever that looks like for your school. And then obviously transition to year two. So celebrate, evaluate, share success. Celebrate's my favorite one out of that because that's not something that is done a lot in schools anymore, or at least not done in ways outside of generally academic achievement, probably sports achievement as well. But like really celebrate, hey, this is what you've done. Look what the impact you've made to your entire school. So kind of make sure that all of that is acknowledged as you move on to year two and beyond. You're obviously, depending on what school level you're at, middle school or high school, have some students that are naturally aging out or graduating. They're going to need to be sort of replaced on the team. Plus, the team should be growing as the program goes on as well. So just continuing that recruitment and then starting that cycle over again.
So this is just some more about implementation in Pennsylvania. As Dan said, ideally we like to hold them on separate days. The trainings, it can be done in one day, but it's a lot of training in one day for adults, and then trying to do the peer leader training in the same day. So ideally 2 days, back-to-back days if possible, but we of course work with school schedules and the faculty as needed. And then the peer leaders and the adult advisors work on those positive messaging campaigns. As part of the grant with OMSAS, we were giving the schools $1,000 stipend for those messaging campaigns. So moving forward, that grant, I'll talk about this in a later slide, but that grant with the state is ending September 30th. So if anyone's looking to write this into any grants in the future, we always suggest to write some extra money in there for the campaigns. Typically, schools aren't spending the whole $1,000, so 750. I mean, you could put $1,000 in there for the stipend just in case. But the extra money to put towards the campaigns is helpful for the schools. I will say that. This way they can spend some money on arts and crafts materials, on t-shirts. Another school even bought like a Cricut machine so they could make t-shirts, cups, and things like that. It was really helpful to give the schools the ability to really do things on like social media and things like that too. So the stipend money really was helpful. So all schools were given the ability to participate in the community of practice that we put together, which was also very helpful. We were connecting schools from around the state virtually, and they were connecting, really just going over any challenges that they encountered implementing sources with meetings, with things, and then also celebrating successes. Like Dan said, we definitely have to celebrate those successes, and there was a lot of successes with implementing sources across the state over the past couple years. And we were also providing any additional training and education resources that schools were asking over the last couple of years as well. So now we can talk about some of the Pennsylvania specific data. So this was data that was collected over the past year, the last year of the grant. And this was a school from Southwest Pennsylvania. We decided to keep schools' anonymity when related to data. We decided that that was a good idea. So the question was related to this: at my school, students feel safe? Pretty simple question. So the top graph is pre-training data, and then the bottom graph there is 3-month follow-up data. You can see the shade of data at the bottom, purple, light blue, gray, and then light blue all the way to red. And we have the percentages listed on the left. So for pre-training up top, you see 9.1, 9.1%, 27.3. So when you go to the 3-month follow-up data, you can see some of the numbers start to disappear and actually start to get bigger, which is what we're looking for. A little disappears completely, which is great. Sometimes actually goes down just 2%, and then often actually goes up quite a bit in percentage for almost 5%, and then always actually goes up about 7% as well. So students start to see that safety occur with implementing sources after about 3 months. So we implemented source. So before the training, they take the survey. Then after 3 months, we start to see some safety occurring after 3 months, which is great.
Another one, this is from a separate school. So as you can see here, the question was, at my school, students work together and help each other. So you see, even if you sort of combine these and just really make it 3 options, combine not at all and a little, and just say that's basically no, or often and always and yes, you can see that you go from 9.4% of no to absolutely no one that says no, that doesn't happen in their school. And when you combine, you go from just about 69% up to about 83%, which is an increase of just under 15% of students working together and helping each other. I know we are running up on time and we'll be sending this out so you can sort of study these a little bit more, but I just want to kind of give those numbers out quickly as we're coming up on the end. This is from another one, or this is combined for all of our schools as to what they answered. So it's, I would know what to do if another student told me that they were suicidal. So again, sort of combining them, the students who agreed in any way goes from about 59% up to about 69%. So about a 10% increase there, students who felt comfortable that they know what to do. And the students that disagreed went from about 15% up to, or down to about 7%. So a decrease of around 8% in students that didn't feel like they know what to do if another student told them that they were suicidal. And we also leave a space on the survey for students to write in what their own feedback is. And we have a quote specifically from one of the peer leaders, which is, I had a friend send me a suicidal message or I had a friend send a suicidal message to me, and I helped her talk to a trusted adult so she could be safe. And that's awesome. That is sources working perfectly. So I was told about that personally as well from one of the adult advisors, and it made us all very happy to have heard that, and then it worked that well. I think for time's sake, we're going to skip over these videos, and they'll be
So I've been really
words as well. If you want to look at them, they're just short excerpts from one of the schools that we had trained in the adult advisors in year 2, what they thought about the program.
So how to bring sources of strength to your school. So right now we are grant funded through the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services till September 30th of 2025. So that's right at the beginning of next school year. And that's when that grant will run out. So we are currently grant funded through the Healthy Transitions Grant of Luzerne and Wyoming counties, and you can implement sources of strength through that grant, and that is for the next few years. I believe that grant is still good for the next 4 years, I believe. And then we are also grant funded through the Thrive Grant of Beaver County. That grant is also good for the next couple years. I'm not exactly sure how many years that grant is, but it is still good for the next couple years. So if schools in Beaver County can implement sources under the Thrive Grant, schools in Luzerne and Wyoming counties can implement sources under the Healthy Transitions Grant, and schools can still implement sources under the UMSOS grant statewide. Um, so until September 30th. And then schools can also utilize PCCD grant funding, specifically school safety and mental health grants through PCCD, which is the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency funding. And sources can be implemented in public, technical, alternative, and public and private schools. So there's really not a whole lot of barriers to implementing sources. It can be implemented in a lot of diverse school settings. These are just some resources that we thought we would add in: 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. That information is there. You're going to get all this information. And then you also have the Trevor Project in the Steve Fund. That information is there as well. And this is our contact information for our organization. You can scan the QR code, visit our website, email us, or call us at that information there. And then the last slide, I believe, is mine and Dan's. That's our link tree information. And then that is our contact information. You can email myself or Dan to very simply our names at pmhca.org. That is all we have.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Dan, for a very informative presentation on sources of strength. We definitely have some questions for you about that. We've got about 9 questions in the chat currently. So we're going to go right into those.
Okay.
Sharon wanted to know, it was a slide early on in your presentation that when you did that crazy dot graph, uh, Sharon wanted to know, are attempts and ideation self-reported on your Name 5 Friends survey, or is that gathered from school records?
So no, this was just specifically in this kind of questionnaire was sent out about who are you connected to, and you self-reported on there. So it would be simply your own self-reporting, and this would be outside of school records. This was specifically by the researchers. I think that answers the question.
Yeah. Sharon also wanted to know, is there specific research on middle school aged students in grades 6 through 8?
So these were done at different schools that were kind of combined between ages and also settings between rural and a bit more urban. So they were kind of going more for the collection of vastness of data than specifying exactly where it works from age group to age group. But you can look into the data a little bit more and sort of see where schools were individually in addition to the overall.
Yeah, sources of strength is considered evidence-based for middle school and high school setting. There is an elementary curriculum for K through 5. Dan, am I correct in saying that? K through 5?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then sources can also be implemented in the college setting and community-based setting as well.
Okay, thank you. So John asked, he says, you mentioned that part of the study was completed in 2019, which was prior to the pandemic. He wanted to know, has additional research taken place since that time to account for new mental health trends in a post-pandemic world?
Not that has been published. So as Kevin said, we went over that. That part was only published a few months ago, and that's the research from 2019. So we are sort of coming up on being able to, by the processes they put these through and how to get them to be able to be published and be added to our evidence base, kind of that criteria, but we do not have that as of yet. But I certainly understand exactly where that's coming from, and I've kind of been anxious myself to see where that goes because it is certainly quite a different scenario.
Yeah, sure, for sure. I'd be interested to see that information also, just because we know that the pandemic changed so much, especially when it comes to anxiety and depression. So, um, Stents wanted to know, how do you get buy-in from the school districts?
Complicated question because so what happens almost all the time when I first talk to a school, whoever I talk to, which is normally a counselor at the school or sometimes even a principal, are very excited and very on board about it. And then they go higher up, and that's where it kind of gets squashed
Mhm.
at the for money reasons, for time reasons. Now, there's other schools that I talk to, and immediately the higher ups are right on board with it. So I don't mean to say that those are illegitimate reasons. I do really understand how difficult that can be. The best way to answer that question probably is kind of what we were talking about as how this program can really fit in differently to different schools, being as absolutely flexible as possible. If they're, hey, we don't have the time to do this training on these days, it has to be spread out. Awesome, we can do that. It's not ideal, but it's not going to completely crush the program. We're able to do that. So getting buy-in from the schools usually right away is awesome. It's just when you get into some of the more administrative levels and where they wanted the money to be spent at, or what maybe they already have in place, is kind of where you run into some of the not backlash per se, but pushback. Kind of weirdly enough, the further you get away from people that actually work with mental health. So we do the best we can, though, to really just mold the program, mold the training however we can to overcome any obstacles that are stopping a school from implementing.
I was wondering because I know just in our conversations and different points and different times about different things where sources have come up. The thought that of looking at sources as just strictly as a suicide prevention model, where I think you all look at it as something a bit more than that, right? Like it was born out of suicide prevention, but has that been able to kind of get schools to come around when you're presenting it to them as the model, as something more than just strictly suicide prevention?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, one of the biggest things I get when we're talking to schools is that they have some type of suicide prevention program in place, but it's that very negative type.
Mhm.
And that's not to say that there's certainly many great prevention programs that work much closer to sort of the edge of that waterfall that we talked about that are wonderful, but those can kind of wear on schools and wear on students for a while. So it's specifically sort of that model of what it looks like, where we start at, where we're working out from. That is why they're the most excited about it. When I'm done talking to them and they're sort of giving me their feedback and their thoughts, I honestly hear way more about what they're thinking and how excited they are about the overall wellness of their school than just specifically looking at and only looking at suicide numbers. So I find that schools are really taking all of that that into account. And frankly, as we're getting bigger and more schools in Pennsylvania are coming on board, it is getting easier to break through in those school districts that were maybe sort of hesitant before, because they're able to see not only other schools in Pennsylvania, but it may be other schools in their district that have implemented it, talk to people that they know, that they trust at other schools, and it's kind of gaining that sort of word of mouth traction. Or if I start presenting, they're telling me, oh, I used to work at this school with this principal and they were telling me about it. So that's also come into play as well. That's been very helpful and made my job easier in a lot of respects.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat right now, and Sharon says that she looks at it as a resiliency model, and then I see Mandy chiming in there, saying that definitely is a wellness model that highlights the resiliency that people already have. So very good points. Very good points. John in the chat, since I saw that real quick, wanted to know um, number of male versus female and different race percentages. Do you have any information on gender and race differences percentages when it comes to the information, the data for sources?
So
We
in the
do
overall,
it.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Kev.
I was just going to say, we do as far as the Pennsylvania data, the national data. I don't think we have that, do we, Dan? Not
In what
national.
we have highlighted and kind of put together for the best and easiest consumption, it is not part of that or broken down into that way. I've read through all of the articles and all of the evidence base, but it's been a minute at this point. But I do not remember at any point in there it being broken down, at least in the articles that I've read that were published on the research. So I don't think so, to the best of my recollection.
Okay.
So the Pennsylvania data, if anyone would ever be interested in looking at it more deeply, we can break the data down into schools individually, schools all together. We can Jamal, you know, we have it on one of the dashboards.
Dashboards.
We can take a deep dive into the data and look at a lot of specifics in the data. So
For sure. For sure.
yeah.
Maybe we will send out some screenshots of what that might look like after the presentation and some of the resources. It might help give people a picture of what that might look like. So,
Yeah.
Christopher wanted to know where he could find copies of the templated campaigns for peer leaders.
So I don't believe they are familiar for schools that have not implemented sources. That does, when you train with the school and you're registered as an adult advisor and you've gone through it, you are able to access the website. And not only are all of your resources on there, you get a lot of them in person and hard copies, but I don't believe they are just accessible for anyone to kind of go in, because then frankly they could be used in a lot of ways with sort of the sources names, not in ways that they're supposed to be used for sources.
Thank you. Quinlan wanted to know what age range grades do you serve? And I believe that's middle school through high school, correct? So 6 through 12?
We've gone as
We
far
went
down as
down.
far as fifth.
Yeah.
Every school in Pennsylvania has a different level of where they put their schools in. So we've sort of gotten it. The absolute sort of youngest we're willing to start at is fifth grade. We'd really like it to be 6 to 12. But the few schools that do have fifth grade middle schools, we were able to implement it in there as well.
Okay. Sharon is very excited about sources. Is there a financial commitment for the training or program, a specific grant process, or could we use community grant funds?
Where if you're using community grant funds, are you my question, are you trying to implement in the community or a school? I'm just not 100% sure.
So what I'll say is this, Sharon, we're gonna if Kev and Dan, if you can just, I know you put it on the slide, but if you can put your contact information right into the chat, then that way Sharon can shoot you all an email, because, and she put in the chat in the school, but our PCCD grants are already committed.
Yeah, you should be able to use, yeah, tell you what, Sharon, just connect with Dan and we will figure something out.
Thank you. Yeah, and so Sharon, Dan put their info in the chat, so you can ask those questions and connect with them to figure those things out. So Danielle just asked about the certificate. I believe Colleen could you post some? There we go. So in order to get the certificate of attendance, you have to fill out the evaluation. And then after you fill out the evaluation, you should be led to a link that will be active at 1:15, which is still a couple of minutes away, where you will be able to download your certificate of attendance and go from there. So another question came in, and it is, what role do you think peer leaders play in spreading the message of strength and hope?
Oh, a massive one. They're crucial to really the success of the program because no matter what the most well-meaning adult is able to do or how connected they are in the school, it's really the students that not only need to be the ones to sort of design the programs for what they know themselves and their peers are facing, but to also be the ones to make it something that people want to do. So to go back to what we talked about, the makeup of the team, and one of the big components of that, when you get even a little bit more into it, is what we call the central members. And what we say is we need them on board or someone kind of in that range because what they say is cool is cool. So to have that buy-in from the people that are kind of the trendsetters in the school, which we all know exist, have always existed, and I'm sure will always exist, are able to kind of bring that to anyone if they're a little bit questionable about what is this really going to do, who's involved, I don't know any of those people, things like that. So I hope that answers the question. I'm not entirely sure.
Oh, yeah, no, that was good. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. And one last question is, how do you support ongoing development for trainers and peer leaders?
So our trainers are all internal. So all of the trainers are from Youth Move PA or contracted by us, but supporting the schools and supporting the adult advisors and peer leaders. One of the big things that we do is we hold a community of practice meeting about quarterly. And the way that we do that is to get as many of the schools as possible all on one video call. I say as many as possible because I am never going to get 20 plus schools to be able to have the same time together during the school day. So as we get bigger, we're probably going to split that into two, but that's neither here nor there for the purpose of answering the question. And that allows them to talk to each other. It's very helpful for the schools. We're going to have some schools that are going into year 3 next year, talk with schools that were just trained over the summer and will only get started as their entire school population comes back. So it helps them connect. It helps them be able to create and share ideas, sort of troubleshoot with each other. Because frankly, if a school has an issue about a very specific school problem and how to get over that, another school is probably going to be able to answer that better than I can. I will certainly do my best, but another school is probably really the place where they're going to get a much better answer. And we're always there for any type of support that we can have. We go back for visits. We like to be part of any campaigns that we can and be able to really support in whatever way is possible, which I know sounds sort of like a non-answer, and I'd probably be mad if I asked how you support them any way possible, but it sort of is true. I don't remember a school reaching out and asking me if they could do something that we weren't in some way able to do for them.
Yeah. No,
We,
go ahead, Kev.
I was just, yeah, one other thing we do, I mean, very purposefully, we visit them 3 months from implementation. We visit them, we do school visits 3 months out to support collecting the 3 month data, but we also are asking them if they have any barriers or challenges and celebrate successes. But we're also going out there when they're doing one of their meetings too, to sit in on their meeting and see if they need any support. So Dan and Mandy are really doing those 3 month meetings. So that's another way we're really supporting them as well.
Yeah, no, and I think you make a good point there. Like it's sometimes hard when you are trying your best to, continue to help people and grow and learn, right? And I think those community of practice meetings that you mentioned are a great way to do that. Gives people a room to come together and see what, challenges some different schools maybe facing, and then it gives you a chance to celebrate those wins and the things that are going well. And I think that's a great way to continue to help people when you're doing something like this, where you go into a place before the school year begins and you do all of this training and stuff, and then as the school year progresses, you kind of want to make sure that they're doing all right. So I think that's a great way to do it. All right. Well, we want to say thank you to Kevin and Dan for your sources of strength presentation. A lot of interest in the chat. There are some people who are saying that they're part of a school who actually does sources of strength. So that's an awesome thing to see. And we hope that the information that was provided today can help some others kind of get on board and implement also. So want to thank you for the presentation. For everyone else, our next webinar presentation will be on June 11th, and it is Internet Safety, presented by Richard Savello, and we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, everybody be safe, and we'll talk to you then.